Welcome back to the DR Speed YouTube channel. Today we're going to be taking apart this engine. It's 5.3 LS motor. All of you guys probably know that. Going to be putting a cam in it with my wife, Amber. And just going over the basic steps. We're hopefully going to get the cam out and make sure cam and lifters are okay, because the plan is to not change the lifters. So we'll take you along for the teardown and everything and show you guys, I guess, how we do it. I'm going to try using this Chrysler harmonic balance puller. Got it at O'Reilly's. If that doesn't work, I've got the old trusty 3-jaw puller. Just put it on there. Make sure it's seated in the grooves back here. And then tighten it up and it should pull it out. You might have to try a couple different steps with the push rods that go in there. Here it goes. You can see we got it off. Here's kind of what the puller looks like. It's got different length rods for different length poles. Little 3-jaw puller. First time I've actually used it. Works pretty good. I usually struggle with one of those for about 20 minutes and it comes off. But this is free to rent if you return it, and I might keep it. It's hard to say. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is remove the spark plug wires, valve covers, and rocker arms and push rods. Here we go. Here's your rocker arms and valve springs. Kind of take a look in there, make sure nothing obvious is damaged or broken. That's the side the fresh air comes in, so it's always cleaner. This side's always kind of darker. This is where the dirty air comes out and goes into the intake manifold through the PCV. I don't see any, metal up there or nothing. So we'll take these rocker arms off and inspect them for the wear that we normally see on these engines. You can pick the whole kind of assembly out with this bottom part. That way you don't have to take each individual rocker loose and move them one by one. And I always look at the pivot ball on the push rod and make sure they're all shiny. You can see this one right here is not as shiny as the one next to it. I'll try to get a close-up of that. Oh, you guys had to switch cameras. You can see the one on the right is nice and like a mirror finish, and the one on the left has grooves in it and wear. That is going to be a lot of your ticking that you're going to hear in these engines. They get old and they get like a lifter tick, and a lot of that is just the push rod is wore out and has slack in the rocker. We'll look at the rocker on that one, and it's going to be worn as well in that ball socket in there compared to the one next to it that is once again like a mirror finish. You don't want to put a new push rod on this old rocker arm, because that old rocker arm is just going to wear the new push rod out. So always look at your push rods when you're doing this kind of stuff. We're replacing these ones anyway. But if your push rod's bad, your rocker arm's going to be bad. And if you put a new push rod on your old rocker arm, it's going to ruin that one also. So just something to look out for that I've seen. Usually these, you know, Facebook Marketplace 120,000 mile LS motors have like 250 on them. And you got to check for wear on stuff. Now we can take all the push rods out. We found that bad one. We need to inspect them all when they come out to make sure we get the correlating rocker arm replaced on the one that's got the bad push rods. Another wear point you're going to want to look at is the top of the valve stem right there. It should be nice and perfectly flat with no grooves or marks on them anywhere. If you got wear on those, then it's pretty much head rebuild time, and then you got to pull the heads anyway. But ours look okay. So we're going to start removing the front cover. There's 2 bolts on the bottom, and then all these bolts around the top, or the front, and then it'll come off. Just take the front cover off. Look at stuff in here, make sure everything's okay looking at least. You know, easiest time it's ever going to be to replace any of that. We're going to replace the oil pump because we don't know anything about the motor. Rotate this till the timing marks line up. You can see this dot, and it's probably hard to see on camera, but there's a dot on the crank gear right here. You don't have to take the oil pump off. You can do this actually in the vehicle on most things, but just make sure those are lined up, and then that puts it at, you know, top dead center, whatever you want to be. We don't know if it's 360 out or not, but if you line them up before you take them apart and you line them back up the same way they were, you know it's okay. They should be straight up and down. I'll get a better picture when I get the oil pump off. Now we're going to take the crank or the cam sprocket off. Once you get the bolts out, you just kind of wiggle it off, and then you can work the chain off of it. And then that reveals the thrust plate for the cam. You take those bolts out. And then you can pry this thrust plate off. And as you see, there's a gasket. And if you're in here, just spend the 15 or 20 bucks and buy the new thrust plate and the gasket. If not, you're going to have low oil pressure problems. These have lifter trays that hold the lifters in place and hold them straight. But you know, you can turn the cam a couple times, and that's supposed to push all the lifters up in place You can see the cam's kind of wanting to come out now. But I don't really ever trust them. We've got it on a stand, so we're going to turn it upside down so the lifters cannot fall out. You can only do this on an LS motor because they'll only go up so far in that tray, but they will fall out the bottom if the tray's wore out, and then you'll have to pull the heads and put them back together, put the lifters back in the trays, and just a whole lot of extra work. The customer doesn't want new lifters. He doesn't want like the whole thing gone through. He just wants a cam because it's supposedly a relatively low mile motor. It does have some marks on the back of the heads like it has been rebuilt, but I just never know. I'm not going to trust it, so I'm going to flip the motor upside down, and then the lifters will for sure stay. With the use of the water pump bolts, you can spin it a couple more times and then gently pull the cam out. You don't want to like drag it across the lobes on the bearings and screw those up. Be as gentle as you can and support it and just ease it out. Be careful, these will cut you if you are not careful. There you go. There's the cam. You want to look at all the lobes, these, and make sure there's no obvious damage to them. And these all look really nice. So if the cam looks good, the lifter is also going to look good. So there's really no need to replace them unless you really want to just put new head gaskets on it and spend the extra $150 for some good lifters. I mean, that's up to you. This customer believes this is a low mile motor, so he doesn't want to do that if we don't have to. And because we're replacing the oil pump on this, I do that with all my cam jobs. It's $150 to have really good oil pressure. I put a Milling Performance, I think 10296 pump in them that gives really good oil pressure all the time. My C10 that you guys have seen has like 180,000 miles on the engine, and it has like 65 pounds of oil pressure. So it's just well worth it. Take all the oil pan bolts out. And then we'll take the pickup tube off.
Cut that out. I don't want to.
And then we'll just take these out. You don't need that anymore. And now if you're going this far and you're changing the oil pump, then you take the oil pump bolts out and then pull the pump off, and we're ready to order parts because we know everything else is okay.
These four?
Just these two on each side.
Yeah.
And then to get the pump off, you just slide it off. If you want to actually find out what size your motor is, for sure, because everyone says there's 5.3s on Facebook. There's no such thing as a 4.8 liter for sale. There's the crankshaft part number. That will tell you exactly what size it is if you look that up. But then you can pull your chain off, and you're ready to start reassembling if you have all the parts. Said you could do this in the vehicle or truck. You don't have to replace the oil pump. You can do it without taking the pan and oil pump off. But since we're here and we don't know anything about this motor other than supposedly it's low mile, I'm gonna do it. Alright guys, got our parts all set up. Got a GM gasket kit, some Brian Tooley valve seals, valve springs rated for 560 lift, timing chain and gear, Brian Tooley push rods, Summit Racing balancer bolt, milling oil pump. It's got a high pressure, the normal spring in it. They come with a couple other springs that you can lower it a little bit or raise it a lot. And the O-ring cam thrust plate with the new seal and the cam. Here's Brian Tooley Racing Stage 2 truck cam, 212, 218 duration, 553 lift, 110 LSA. I've used these cams a few times before. They drive pretty good with the stock converter. They sound good. You get a decent amount of power gain, and you don't really lose any low end. So let's get to putting it all in. You want to lube up your cam after you clean it before you install it, and kind of spread it around on the bearing journals, and just ease it in. Careful not to, beat it onto the cam bearings real hard. It's gonna make a little bit of noise, but as long as you're not like beating it in, it should be okay. When it's installed, I'll flip the motor over and then bring it back. Alright, we got it upright. I got the front cleaned off. However you want to do it, scraper, razor blade, however. Time to install the new cam retainer. The kit came with new bolts and everything. And then it says 18 foot-pounds, according to the internet. Now I like to take my cam gear and kind of set it on there and get the camshaft lined up. Okay, maybe you guys can see it. There's a dot right there and a dot right there. It'll be lined up. The way I do it is I take the cam gear off, put the chain on, and then get the chain lined up, and then slip it on cam. And these are 26 foot-pounds according to the internet as well. I put a little blue Loctite on them just for peace of mind. You need to double check your timing marks are lined up before you torque it. And I put this back on and then spin it around, and it should stay, lined up. Be kind of difficult with the compression since it doesn't have any of the rocker arms on and all the spark plugs are in. See, we're coming back around. There's the mark on the crank. And they're lined up again. Not hard to see. And with the new timing gear and timing chain, there's a lot less slack than the old one had. It's only like a $30 part. So I always change them because it pretty much half of the slack it used to have with the old timing chain and gear. Well, now we'll get it ready and install the oil pump. I always put some lube in there. You can see the gears in person. Put some lube in there and spin it around so this pump doesn't start dry its first time. Just helps them build oil pressure a little bit faster also. And then I torque these to 22. I think the spec's 18 or so, but I just feel a bit better about 22. Now we can clean the front cover up and the oil pan and pickup tube and get it all reassembled. Put on the balancer now. Get a balancer installer tool. I don't know what brand this is, but I have it. And I get the crank pulley started. Screw the tool in. You want to screw the tool in as far as you can get it, so you don't pull the threads off out of the crank. You know, it'll bottom out, and then you run the other one in, and then you hold the stud and just turn the inner nut until the balancer is installed. You'll feel it stop. You don't really want to run this in with a bolt. You can strip the crank threads out and then you're in a bigger issue. And you'll feel it stop. It'll just stop going in. And then install your crank pulley bolt. You can use an OEM one or aftermarket one. And you get your torque wrench out. Torque it to spec. And then you can reassemble your front stuff or do the valve springs, whatever you want next. It doesn't really matter. Alright, to do the valve springs, I have this nice little tool. I think it's a Bluegrass Motorsports tool. I don't know. Search LS valve spring tool and pick your favorite one. Take the spark plugs out, put your finger in the hole, and rotate the engine by hand until you feel it stop pushing air up, and then the piston will be at top dead center. You can look in there and verify. But what I like to do to break them free, because sometimes they're pretty stuck, you can also use air to hold the valves up. If you have air compressor, mine literally slung a rod, so I don't have an air compressor at the moment, is I hit the side of the retainer a little bit to break them free. If you're in person, you can kind of see little bubbles come up. Sometimes you'll hear it change. I'm just trying to break the keepers free. And then move, tighten the tool down. Hit the camera, that's required. And you can pull the keepers out with the magnet, and the piston will hold the valve in place from falling in. You can get cams that don't require valve springs, but in my opinion, if they don't require valve springs, they're just not going to be that amazing. Not that this cam is like a super aggressive cam, but it's too much for the factory valve springs. And you take the valve spring retainer out. And we're doing valve seals on this also, so just kind of grab and pull them out. Don't grab the valve stem, just the seal is what we're looking for. And just put your little seal in. Push them down all the way. You can do these ones by finger. On some of the other ones you got to use like a socket and tap them in, but these are pretty easy. And your new valve springs. Factory retainers. Kind of eyeball them. And then before you squish it down, look down them and make sure that the valve stem is kind of centered in the hole. You don't want this way off to the side like that, and then you try to compress it. You want it pretty centered. And make sure you're not digging down the side of the valve when you're tightening this. I'll usually lift the valve up. If you have an air compressor, it's not going to be an issue because the valve will stay up. Install the keepers. Make sure and get them in their little groove. You can see they got like a little groove, little notch on this and a groove on the valve. Make sure it's in that before you release this. They'll come shooting out, and then you'll get to go looking for little tiny pieces, and they could fall somewhere into the engine, and that's not a good time. And then just simply release it. And I'll remove this here. And I like to, with the plastic side of the hammer, hit the valve stem and just kind of do that. If they're gonna fly off, usually they'll do that now, not when you start the engine. But you just continue on to the rest of them, and then I'll do that, and then we'll go to the installing the rockers. Alright guys, got all 16 valve springs and seals replaced. Now it's time to install the push rods and rocker arms. Got new BTR push rods. It's always a good idea to kind of look through the hole. I don't know if you guys can see through any of those. And make sure there's no debris inside. And lube both ends. It doesn't matter on this engine what end goes up, because they're all new. Got them nice and lubed up. You just stick them down the push rod hole you got them out of and push them down. That pushes the lifter onto the camshaft and verifies that you have them in the right place. It's kind of hard to mess these up because they got a tray in there that guides them in, but it's just a good practice. And lube up your valve stem. It's going to take a couple minutes for oil to get up here, so you just want everything nice and lubed. And this end of the push rod, got everything lubed up, and now we're ready to put the rocker arms on. Alright, we're going to install our rocker arms with our one new one. All the other ones passed inspection. Pretty easy on LS. You just set them down, make sure the little pedestal is on there, and then start all the bolts by hand. That way you don't cross thread them and pull threads out of the head. And we got them on, you know, kind of line them up, make sure they're straight. Before running them down with any kind of ratchet or power tool. It's always best to check them. A lot easier to double check than it is to rethread something. Definitely don't want to be screwing up cylinder head. Once you got them all on, you can tighten them, you can run them down with a tool of your choice. Alright, my tool of choice is electric ratchet. First you back them off on accident. And just ease it down. You don't want to, you know, give it all the beans. And if they start to open the valve like that, I kind of back off, stop, and then go to the next one. Right, now that we're sure we got them all on the thing straight, torque them to 22 foot-pounds. And I like to rotate the motor a little bit and then torque them again just to make sure if any rocker arm is up on the top of the lobe lift, that it's now moved and it's going to be all the way down. And then I like to, after I've torqued them, I like to spin everything over a couple times just to make sure everything's moving the way it should. It sounds normal, there's no tight spots. And then I'll go through and torque it again, just to double check that I didn't miss anything, everything was in line. It's easier to double check now than after you run it and the rocker arm falls off, or valve spring breaks or something. And everything pretty much critical and hard is done. You just move valve cover gaskets and valve covers and then accessories and oil and start it up.
Like that.
And there you have it, folks. Completely reassembled, ready to go in his truck. And then he's going to bring it for tuning. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe. Check out our Facebook and Instagram, DR Speed. Should have the same logo as this. And hope it helped you guys. Any questions, just comment below and ask, and I'll try to help you.